So when it comes to video, most experts say you have to have a hook to bring people in because you only have 3 seconds to grab their attention. Well, there was mine. But in reality, today I'm going to talk about the market in Henderson and the Las Vegas area. And that in of itself is the hook. Everybody's interested on what's going on in the real estate market nowadays. This is Alex Rivlin with the Rivlin Group. And today we're going to talk about exactly that, the Henderson and Las Vegas market. So as you know, things are going crazy, right? And some people are thinking that things are starting to slow down and stabilize, and we are starting to see a little bit of a shift, but not necessarily in the way that everybody would think, right? Basically, we had a speed limit of 65 miles per hour. So we were going 195 miles an hour, and well, we've slowed down to about 150 miles an hour. So we are still well over double the speed limit. Tickets are still being given out, and there's a little bit of craziness. But the good news is there are ways to navigate this market, and it's an amazing time to sell. It's also an amazing time to buy for so many factors. Last month in the Henderson area, there were 661 single family residences sold. That is referring to the resale market and those new homes that they did list through the MLS. Now, the median sales price of those homes was $455,000, and they were selling for a little bit over their list price, listing more in the $449,000 and selling in the $455,000 from a median perspective. So you can see that people are bidding over. However, you are seeing these bidding wars where people are getting $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 over. And in an anomaly situation, yes, that is actually happening. However, when you look at the reality, the statistics across 661 homes and even more in the greater Las Vegas area, when they're showing that they're $5,000 or $6,000 over, that means that things are changing later down the road. So after inspections, after appraisals, people are deciding to pull back on their offer and try to renegotiate. Now you'll ask that question, what about if they've waived the appraisal? Now, if it's a cash property, they could do that. However, on a property with a loan, they're still needing that appraisal. So some buyers are either falling out of contract or they're going back to the seller saying, I didn't expect when I waived appraisal for the gap to be so much. Let's give an example of, I offered $450,000 on the property. It appraised at $410,000. Now, when it comes to the greater Las Vegas area, there were 3,543 single family residence homes sold at a median price of $395,000. So you can see that we've really had some increases in median prices. We are at record prices right now, and there's good news there too. If you think that a crash is coming or even a major correction, that's not what all of the indications are saying. Now, one of the things that we're seeing a lot in this area as well as across the nation is something that we refer to as buyer fatigue. And that's that buyers are out there, they really want a home, and they're starting to get discouraged. So buyer fatigue is setting in where people are throwing their hands up in the air and saying, I'm not going to continue with this. I'm going to renew my lease. I'm going to decide to stay in the place that I'm in right now, even if that situation is not ideal for them. As a result of buyer fatigue, we are also starting to see inventory rise. Sellers are getting a little more comfortable with the idea of actually selling at this point and realizing this is a great opportunity for them to sell at a very heightened area. Now let's talk about the overall inventory and what that actually means. So a buyer's market, by and large, is when you have over 7 months of inventory. A neutral market is between 6 and 7 months of inventory, and anything under 6 months of inventory is a seller's market. Basically meaning that the seller has an advantage. To the contrary, a buyer's market is where the buyers are in favor. There are fewer buyers and a lot of homes on the market, so you get to be more selective. You really get to pick out which home you want. So where are we at right now? Oh, for the past few months, we have been under 1 month of inventory. It's about as much of a seller's market as you can get by definition. On a note to sellers in this market, don't be too unrealistic. If you're realistic and you price properly, that's how you're actually going to get the most out of your home. Because priced properly will draw a lot of attention, will draw the eyeballs and the excitement around your house. And that's how you'll actually get more offers and ultimately be able to weed through and find that great offer for that perfect person or family that wants your home now. We are expecting that the home appreciation is going to fall back in line with normal levels at that 3, 4, 5%, as opposed to the 10, 12, and 15% that a lot of markets have been experiencing in the last year. We're also expecting that mortgage rates will continue to go up throughout 2022 and 2023 even. So now you're thinking, but what about all of these homes in forbearance? Well, I will let you know that many homes have come out of forbearance successfully, and those that are still in forbearance largely have equity, well in excess of 10% of the property. So we don't expect to see a rush or a glut in the foreclosure market. However, some of those people now coming out of forbearance are going to add to the inventory of the market, which again is going to bring those appreciation levels back down to a much more normal pace and give an advantage to the buyers of more inventory to choose from and better power to negotiate on the ones that maybe don't exactly meet their criteria at 100%. So another major factor that surged in this last year is second homes. Well, because of the opportunity to buy, the appreciation that was happening, the low interest rates, and some people speculating and saying, I could buy a home, stay in it for a month out of the year, and then rent it out, maybe Airbnb, maybe a 6-month rental or a few 3-month rentals, corporate rentals. That has absolutely surged. We actually went from 2% in 2019 of second home purchases to 27% in 2020. It's a phenomenal number and phenomenal growth. On a final note, let's talk about overall home sales and forecasts of where home sales are going. So there are some major entities that have analysts looking at all of the data, all of the financial moves, everything and how money flows when it comes to real estate. That's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the Mortgage Bankers Association. They look at this in great detail because they need to know and understand how much money they have to have behind them in order to invest in mortgages to the future. In 2020, there were 5.64 million homes sold. The expectation as we get through the rest of 2021 is that there are going to be 7 million homes sold nationwide. That's a huge amount of homes. Now, when it comes to the local area, Henderson and Las Vegas, our number is going up a little more aggressively than the rest of the nation because we are a moving destination for so many. So, as I mentioned, 7 million in 2021, and they're estimating 7.5 million for 2022. So we are still looking at more homes being sold, which is also going to add to the stability of the market. As I mentioned, interest rates going up, but only incrementally, and home prices continuing to appreciate at a much more standard pace that we've seen over the past 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So that is our mortgage update in a nutshell. The market is still hot. It is a great time to sell. It's also an advantage time to buy, even though by definition, it's not a buyer's market. This is Alex Rivlin with the Rivlin Group. If you love my channel, love what I'm talking about here, please like my page or subscribe below. I'd love to see you back and be able to share more and more of this critical information with you regarding the housing market. And you could also check me out with my restaurant videos and lifestyle videos around Henderson, Nevada. We know Henderson.